recording is on.
Good morning, everyone. Everyone's still not back from the breakout room, so wait just a second here.
Here they come.
Okay, here we are. Welcome back.
Is that everyone?
Yes.
Okay, we're all here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
If you don't know who I am, I'm Robert Althouse. I'm an avid and co-founder of this Zen Life Meditation Center in Chicago. And I'm going to give a Teisho this morning called Trust What Moves in the Dark. And I have a lot to say, so once I start talking, I might not come up for air until 11 o'clock. So maybe, one way of talking about a kind of large crisis in our world now is that it's not just global warming, it's a polycrisis. So all of these different crises are all interrelated. There's crisis in education, there's crisis in the economy, crisis in politics, crisis in morals, spirituality, and I'm guessing that when the planet is not healthy, then we're not healthy on some level. And we can either be in denial about this, or we can open our eyes and try to bear witness to our world. That's really what our Zen practice is inviting us to do, is to be present to what's here. I guess the question I would start by asking you is, I think we're experiencing the polycrisis in our families, in our relationships, in our homes, in our health, in the doctor's office, at the market. Where are you experiencing it? How are you experiencing it? Anyone want to give a crack at that? What comes up for you when you? How do you experience that personally in your own daily life? Going to work, making breakfast. Yeah, that's you. Okay, the cell phone. Yeah, good. Now we have more information than we've ever had in the history of the world, and yet we are less and less able to communicate.
I think there's an overwhelm.
Overwhelm, yes. Girl?
Well, when I wake up in the morning, I'm kind of feeling maybe unsafe compared to a year ago, or before, and certainly before. There's something not right.
Okay.
And it's an overarching thing, it's kind of like when you wake up and feel there's something wrong.
Okay. Sense of unease, angst. Something isn't lining up. Kind of surreal. Gary, you were just telling me about reading the new budget. Cut out all the environmental things, all
Yes,
the money to take care of parks, the Great Lakes.
well, I told Roshi just before we started, my wife was so excited that I spent last night looking at 68 pages of the Environmental Protection
Speak out
Agency's,
here.
Environmental Protection Agency's budget, and all these programs that are now going to be receiving $0. The budget's not final yet, but that's the proposal. But as far as crises, what I was going to say, I feel like the country is in a moral crisis.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
I see 6 billion people on this earth, and I feel like I run into so many little people, adults, who seem to be so alone or feel so isolated and alone, even in the midst of all of us here together.
Okay, well, you're teaching in what level in the schools?
7th grade.
Where do you teach?
I teach here in the community in Oak Park.
Yeah. So you're experiencing that loneliness in your own students. Yeah.
I think the sadness, as a physician, it seems like we're going backwards. We've made such progress in the last 100 years, and now we're developing vaccines, and it's just tragic.
Yeah.
Deeply uncertain weather.
Speak up.
Deeply uncertain weather. Just,
Uncertain weather.
3 years of drought we've had now. 2 years, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Every morning checking the weather report to see, what's going on.
We just had a dust storm here 2 weeks ago that was unprecedented for Chicago that reminded me of the Dust Bowl.
That was the last time, 1933. That one reached
From
DC.
monocrop farming,
Yeah.
losing topsoil, plowing, unhealthy farming practices that go back to the Industrial Revolution that we have that are not sustainable, and we had a dust storm.
I think people, including me, feel scared to share your true voice. People are scared of their freedom.
Okay, you're scared to actually speak up because you don't know what the consequences are unpredictable. It goes back to feeling unsafe. Yeah.
The other thing that bothers me is that I see there's a sharp division in all of us. I used to think the United States is united, but it's not. I mean, it just isn't. There are these people that are very strongly one way and other people very strongly the other way, and it's not united, and it doesn't bode well for the future.
It doesn't. Anyone online?
Well, yeah, hi. Just the awareness of all the suffering in the world that is being caused by the restricting or eliminating funding to AIDS, to USAID.
Oh yeah, that was terrible. They cut out USAID, which is saving a lot of lives from HIV, and that's people are losing their lives as a result of that. It wasn't.
Gaza is another really big one for me that is on my mind a lot. Yeah.
So these are uncertain times. It feels like I've been saying that, but introducing my talks with the same thing for the last 10 years. So let's start with a quote from Dogen. When our heart and mind is not filled with the truth, we think we have everything. When our heart and mind is filled with the truth, we realize that something is missing. Back in 1980s, I was working for Steve Sazek, who had an art store in Venice, California. And he was a student of Trungpa Rinpoche's, and he's now the art director of the Art Shambhala, a global network in the Shambhala organization. And he had an art store called Ashe Arts in Venice, California. And Ashe is a word from Tibetan that means one stroke of confidence, one stroke. First thought, best thought. It's a teaching of Trungpa Rinpoche. And I had a job working for Steve at his art store, and I was a framer. And the art store was here, and there was a parking lot, and then across the parking lot was the frame shop where I worked. And I didn't have to deal with any retail customers. I was there all by myself, very happy as a clam, working. No one bothered me. All the people that ordered things to be framed went into the art store, they took the order, they took their money, and then they sent me the receipt, and I ordered the materials. I had all this beautiful equipment for framing art, and I was happy as a clam. Worked there all day, and I had a little TV in the corner that sometimes I would turn on. And on this particular morning, January 28th, 1986, I was particularly excited because the Challenger was taking off, 7 astronauts, and I was watching it on the TV. And 70 seconds into the launch, it exploded. And it stopped my world. I was weeping. And I think why it stopped my world is up until that point, I had this sense that technology was invincible. I actually had that assumption that, you expect planes to get you to where you're going. But I expected that rocket, but I certainly didn't expect it to explode. And that was a kind of a turning point in a way for me, because I realized that I'd grown up in this culture where we kind of have this assumption that we're exceptional as a country. And there's so much that I have learned since then that contradicts that assumption. Doesn't mean we're not good people. Americans have all kinds of good qualities, but this assumption that we're exceptional, that we're somehow better than the rest of the world, or that we know something more, or even the notions of success and progress, of what we think that is. The more I practice, kind of the less I know, and the more I feel like I'm a part of all of it. I mean, we can say the world is suffering, but we're all suffering with it. There's no way to separate out and say, oh, that's causing the suffering over there. We are soaked in the blood of colonialism. It's our culture. It's the air we breathe. And I'm not saying that to make you feel bad or to make you feel guilty, but just acknowledge our culture that we are living in and the stories we receive about what success is and what happiness is, and they are so thin. And so I think what happens when we take up Zen practice, like you do here, and you sit and you have the courage to be alone with yourself and pay attention to your experience, you begin to open your heart. And if you're really opening your heart's going to break. If you're paying attention and you're not in denial about what's going on here, your heart's going to break, and it's going to break open. And when your heart breaks open, we call that bodhicitta. Your greatest strength is your sad and tender heart. So how do we remain open in such times? How do we, and I know this from the pandemic, and I know you probably, I'm sure you all have had this, how we dull ourselves down. And there's some good reasons for doing it. We live in an urban environment where you can, if you received all the stimulation, you'd go nuts. But we also are in an information age. We are soaked with information 24/7, and these, right? So I remember doling myself down during the pandemic, and the trouble with doling yourself down is not only do you dull the pain, but you dull the joy too. And there's something about the practice of bearing witness in our practice of the three tenets of not knowing, bearing witness, and loving action. When we bear witness, we open our hearts to what's here. And, you know, Poles have this great saying, the only open heart is a broken heart. And so life is more than the search for happiness. A meaningful life leads to joy in some way. You're serving something larger than yourself, something that's going to continue after you die. You're in service to that. So I have been, here, let's appreciate a case. This is case 19. Ordinary mind is the way. One of my favorite cases, but every time I read a koan, I say that it's my favorite koan. Right now, this is my favorite koan today. I've shared this a lot. I love this koan. So, I have a long page. Ordinary mind is the way. If I can find it. Just not going to find it. Oh, I got the wrong book. Let me like flounder around here.
Case 19.
You know, but take me out of my misery.
I'd love to see that.
Is it case
Okay,
19?
ordinary mind is the way. Joshu earnestly asked Nansen, "What is the way?" Nansen answered, "The ordinary mind is the way." Joshu asked, "Should I direct myself toward it or not?" Nansen said, "If you try to turn toward it, you go against it." Joshu asked, "If I do not try to turn toward it, how can I know that it is the way?" Good question, right? Reasonable. If I don't turn toward it, how am I going to know it's the way or not? And Nansen answered, "The way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion. Not knowing is a blank consciousness. When you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you will find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament. How can it be talked about on the level of right and wrong?" At these words, Joshu was suddenly enlightened. I love that koan. And koans aren't, necessarily to be answered. They're to be contemplated and turned over and appreciated as a pickle, which life is full of these kind of pickles that koans present to us. So what does it mean to trust what moves in the dark? I have learned about this, and I came up with this title about 3 weeks ago. It sounded really good, and then I was talking to Christine Dussel last week in Kinship Hour, and I told her I was going to give this talk. She said, "Well, what's it about?" I said, "I have no idea." But it sounded like a good idea for a talk, so now I have to go. I like doing it, so now I have to go actually find something good to say that will match the title. And it's not so easy to talk about what does it mean to trust what moves in the dark. And yet we all dream every night. Sleep is extremely important for our well-being, and We have a whole nother story going on there in our dreams that is very real at the time that we're having it. And then we wake up and generally forget those dreams. I've learned about trusting something underneath. I've learned it through Zen, definitely through Zen practice, but I also learned it as an artist. Now, there was a time when I was still in LA and I was practicing pretty much all the time as a painter, and the rents in Venice had gotten very expensive, so a lot of artists, including myself, moved to downtown LA because the rents were cheap there, and I got a whole floor on the top of a garden business for $600 a month. I was so happy. I had this whole space to myself, big space. I could do big paintings, but it was in a rough area. The town, it was like right half walk away from the Greyhound bus depot. It was rough. A lot of homeless, a lot of people get held up. So I did this painting one day and it was raw, and I just did it quickly on some paper with acrylics, and I painted this something coming out of the earth with jaws. And out of the jaws was coming this butterfly or moth, colorful. It was just raw, and I put it up on the wall of my studio, and I didn't know what I had painted. But I knew that it was full of vitality and life. I didn't know what it was. In fact, as an artist, I didn't really need to know what it was. Maybe I didn't even know. I just didn't know what it was. And I had it tacked on my wall for a year. And then one day I was looking at some books of Mexican art. And I saw Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent. And you know what Quetzalcoatl is, right? On the Mayan temples, it's all over in Mayan art in Mexico. And as soon as I saw Quetzalcoatl, I knew I had painted that as an archetype. Quetzalcoatl is the plumed serpent, a very luminous archetype in Mesoamerican culture. Not unlike Christ as an archetype, not literal. Christ wasn't a plumed serpent, but it's the same kind of energy that was related with transformation and spring. And there was stories about how Quetzalcoatl, when Venus disappeared in the sky, the belief was that Quetzalcoatl was in the underworld battling demons. And then when Venus would come up, Quetzalcoatl would emerge from the underworld victorious. And Quetzalcoatl was based on real things in nature. Quetzal was snake, the knothy from the earth, and Coatl was a real bird. And June and I saw one in Costa Rica some years ago for the first time, and it was beautiful. Have you ever seen a Quetzal? Quetzal is the bird, and Coatl is the serpent. And have you ever seen these? You ever seen one? Oh, you wouldn't know it if you saw it. We had to go kind of searching for it. It wasn't real easy to find, but when we found it, it has a very long tail. And when it flies, it looks like a serpent. It kind of goes like this. Yeah, I was so excited when I saw it. And I proceeded to paint this, and for several years, I just did paintings of Mayan type of figures, and they have glyphs, which are kind of fun and part of their language. I would paint my own glyphs, I'd create them, and I'd paint Quetzalcoatl, because this was for me, it was a living, it was an archetype that had energy and vitality in it. So I think what we discover in this practice, and also many artists discover this, that you find there's a vitality in that place that you don't know. It's not really it's not a blank consciousness. There's something moving in you, in us, in the culture that's underneath. And artists are finding ways of, it can't be expressed very easily in words because there are not words for it. So it gets expressed in poetry, it gets expressed in painting and drawings and sculpture. We find forms to express that which can't be expressed because that's where a lot of vitality is. It's under the surface. And because we live in a culture that reduces everything down to names and categories, we take away, we don't really appreciate the complexity of the world we're living in and the complexity of ourselves and each other. And we don't have conversations that usually honor that complexity. So someone asks you who you are, I say, I'm Roshi, Althouse, I'm a Zen master, I'm the, blah, blah, what you are, what you do, your job, where you grew up. And if you just take a moment to reflect on the ways you identify yourself, you realize that's a little bit of who you are, but it's very little bit, right? You've had a whole life of rich experiences, relationships with parents, teachers, friends, lovers, cousins, aunts and uncles. Rich. That's really beyond words. Any living ecosystem, a prairie, the Great Lakes, the Everglades, a forest, Thatcher Park, national woods. Any ecosystem is a complex, trans-contextual communication taking place on all kinds of levels. And if you try to understand it, it's just overwhelming. You can't understand that, but you can appreciate it. Everything is there is moving. Some things are in homeostasis, some things are adapting, but everything is moving. And in a living ecosystem, we are a living ecosystem. In any living ecosystem, there is nothing that is static. Nothing. Everything is moving. Everything is a relationship. Now, if we are, in a relative sense, static, if there is something that is trying to stay the same in an ecosystem, that means there's a lot of other contexts around it that are working very hard to hold that staticness in place. So, if there's an addict in the family system, that is going to create a lot of chaos in that ecosystem, where a lot of family members have to adapt and do things to compensate and adjust for that addiction. I read something the other day by someone that was really wonderful. They said, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community. Community. This is an ecosystem. We're in one right now. I wonder if we really see how, I think many of you do. The Sangha is a treasure. So, someone said it's a moral problem. Who said, we need a moral ecology, some way of talking about our world that is where morality and relationships and dignity and personal integrity are at the heart of who we are and what we love and what we are nurturing and tending to and taking care of. We have this metaphor. we have this metaphor of the rider and the elephant. And Erica mentioned it last week in her talk. And it's a good metaphor, but you know, so it works up to a point, and it's a good metaphor for beginning students that are learning meditation. And the metaphor is that, you know, that we are like a rider and an elephant. It's a metaphor. Because it's a metaphor, we could understand it in different ways, like a koan. But the one way that we usually interpret it for the class is when we get to the point where it's clear we need a stronger medicine, like one-pointed attention, to really kind of knuckle down and pay attention to the moment, and we use this counting the breath as a way to bring that stronger medicine into our life. And we say we need that because without that stronger medicine, we're like the elephants just running wild in the forest and trampling everything. And we are both the rider and the elephant. And the part of us that is rational, that understands things, that knows things, which is important, is the rider. But the other part of us is the elephant, and that's very large. So the elephant's kind of like what's under the surface. And this metaphor works up to a point. So then the metaphor is, well, we need to tame the elephant. Yeah, maybe. And that's probably a useful way to think about meditation. We're taming the elephant, but it doesn't quite work for me anymore. Because first of all, taming an elephant in real life is a cruel thing in circuses. But also, do we want to tame that which is wild in us and unknown? Is it really a question of taming it, or are we channeling it, or are we coming alongside it and making friends with it? It seems to me a little different quality of that metaphor. And I think that's an important distinction, because if you think you're trying to conquer the elephant, that feels violent and doesn't feel right to me. But if you're coming alongside the elephant, it's like if you're talking to someone who's, they're depressed, or you want to be with them. You can be with them across like this, they're here and you're here, and that's fine. But if you come alongside them, you're with them in a more intimate way. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing with the elephant. Maybe it's not that we need to conquer the elephant, but we need to learn how to feed it. Because it's a part of our vitality. And the thing that why Zen is important is because Zen remains wild. That doesn't mean we just go and do anything and we act crazy and take a lot of drugs and be like a beatnik. It doesn't mean that, but it means wildness is, there's an aspect of Zen that just resists being nailed down, resists being reduced down to anything, even an archetype. An archetype is used as long as it's useful, like the raft that takes you across the river, but once you get across the river, you hang on to the archetype, it's gonna get in the way. You gotta climb a mountain now, you wanna lug the raft up the mountain with you? And no. So, and I think this wildness is a really important aspect of the spiritual path of Zen, because it's not really a path. It's not a method. There's no rule about how we're to act or behave, because in any context, it's always changing. So our situations are context specific, and we're always improvising in whatever context we happen to be in. What are we able to be? Who are we able to be this morning as we're together? Here, now. What can I be with you? What can you be with me? This is it. I vow. Relationships are sacred. Communication is sacred. And the terrible thing that I think makes us feel unsafe in the world we're in right now is that we have so contaminated the sacredness of communication by decontextualizing stories, taking something out of the complexity and taking it over here and then using that to manipulate other people, to win an argument. And we do it so much that it's become normalized, and we may not even notice that it's happening. And I think that that is doing something that is fundamentally damaging to our sanity as human beings. And it's part of our task in this moment to retrieve ways of speaking and relating and communicating that honor our complexity. And you know, that's a lot to figure out how to do. It's kind of overwhelming. You know, I've told a story before. It comes out of the Blue Cliff Record somewhere, and it's a beautiful. I won't tell the whole story, but just enough to make a point. There was a sacred mountain in China, Mount Tai. And it was said that the Bodhisattva wisdom Manju Sri hung out there. So the monks, they would go and do pilgrimages on Mount Tai and build little huts there because they were hoping to entice Manju Sri to come by and visit them. Yeah? And there were little huts all over the mountain. And it was against the rules to go there. You weren't supposed to go there, but everyone did. They broke the rule. And that's them. Doesn't mean we should break every rule, but that rule they broke. And that was cool. It's fun to break a rule. And it was dangerous, and it was wild. Because if there had been a rule, oh yes, you can go to Mount Tai, please go, then it would have become, they would have like standardized the specs for how the hut should be built. It should be 10 by 10, and the door should be here, and the door should face north, and there'd be a whole, you know, people would write treatises on how to build the hut. But because it was not okay to do it, it remained wild. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, that's it. That's pretty cool. To be practicing a spiritual path that remains wild and refuses to be nailed down. That means it's not going to be easy to talk about what we're practicing. And we may not be able to say how we can understand our world, but we can trust the Dharma. We can trust a certain kind of sanity and truth in our immediate experience that, you know, the sun comes up. I always say this, the sun comes up every morning. Well, it doesn't really come up, but that's how we experience it. And you know, if you wake up on the wrong side of bed in the morning and you don't get up in the morning and say, boy, it's really a bad sun this morning. You don't say that. Because the sun is like the Dharma. You know, this Dharma is not bad, it's not good. It's pure. It's just sane. It's so sane. So we can trust that kind of sanity. And you know, the origin story of Zen comes out of huge turmoil and chaos, probably much worse than, well, I don't know what's worse, but you know, Zen was really born at the end of the Tang Dynasty, when the Liu Shan rebellion took over about a decade in China, civil war, where it said that as many, a third of the population of China died of disease, war, famine, rape, hunger. And there were two great Chinese teachers that emerged at that time, Shi Zhao and Daimatsu. One went on to kind of found the Rinzai line and the other the Soto line. And they both came up in that time of turmoil because what they were teaching was not some kind of the stereotype of Zen that people think Zen is oh, do Zen and you'll be peaceful. That's so bogus. They weren't teaching that. They were teaching wake up. And there was an urgency about waking up because the world was falling apart. Don't wait till next week. Wake up now. And look at what's happening here. Go out in the field. Walk in the carnal fields where the people are dead and there's graveyards and people are on stretch. Walk out there. Don't turn away from that. And that was Zen. They were teaching a spiritual path that said, look at the world. It's urgent. It's urgent now. Look, it's almost easier for us to imagine the end of our species than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. What does that say about our culture? About our priorities and our values? And so, look, the time we live in is not probably that much different than any other time. We have stories we've learned, and we've been socialized, and a lot of these stories are harmful. And it's up to each of us to question our assumptions, what we think is true, and to continue to learn and open and look at our world as it is as best we can. And to do this in a way that doesn't take us down. I think this is another really important thing to get. When you take the Bodhisattva vow, which is what our practice is to do, we take this infinite vow. We're not going to achieve this vow in our lifetime. This is not about some utopia we're going to attain. You take this vow because mind itself is infinite. We could have a whole discussion about mind now, which I'd love to have. It might take us away from the point. So we take this vow, and we can take it because we are playing an infinite game. It doesn't have an end. There's not a goal line. If you live your life from this kind of courage, a vow, a beneficent universal vow to benefit all beings as best you can, then you have a reason to be here. You have a purpose. And it turns out that this sad and tender heart is a great place of strength. It's not a weakness. You can open your heart to suffering, enormous suffering, and bear witness to it and not be taken down by it. Compassion is resilient. So, maybe I'll read a poem or two. Let me say one more thing about information, because it's very interesting. We think of information as cold data. We live in the information age. We have more information than we know we have to now have news services that curate the news for us, because you couldn't possibly read all the news in any given hour, in any given day that's taking place. And we tend to think of information as cold, hard data. Something we can measure, bits and bytes. That kind of data is for machines, but we're not machine. the Industrial Revolution and modernity has convinced us that the world is a machine, and that's wrong. That's just plain wrong. Any living being system is a complex ecosystem. That's not a machine. And that kind of information is what Gregory Bateson called the difference that makes a difference. Another way of saying this is that information is alive. Now you say, well, trees don't have brains, so we must be superior to trees because we have sort of, but trees, where's the brain in a tree? How does that root that's going down into the darkness of the soil, the tip of that root, how does it know which way to turn? If it turns this way, it goes into dry soil. If it turns this way, it goes into wet, moist soil with all kinds of nutrients. Which way do you think the root's going to turn? Always. It's going to turn towards the moisture and the nutrients. Isn't that intelligence? Isn't that the brain of a tree? The difference that makes a difference is whether it turns left or right. And it turns out that any living organism, plant, animal, bird, insect, beetle, snail, ant, bears, gorillas, all are living based on the difference that makes a difference. All are making these kinds of differentiations because that's what life does. That's what lifing does. We are lifing. And when we reduce gorillas down to gorillas, their name, or us, down to our name, we are losing our humanity, we're losing what is vital to our life. So, let me, I'm talking too much, so time for, oh, one more thing then about information. I'm sorry, I forgot to say this morning. One way of talking about information is noise and signal. And it's really important to understand this because if you have a lot of noise and a little signal, then what you want to do is to clear up the noise so you can hear more signal, right? You know this from, if you're listening to the radio or the television or whatever, you know, we used to have to adjust things on top of the television because it would be too static. And so you adjust the wand on top of the television because it was too much noise, and then you were getting more signal. So if you do a study of anything and you look at that data for a year's time, you're studying hunger or you're studying a forest or you're studying anything, chances are you'll get about 50% signal and 50% noise. Okay? Now if you shorten that up and you study that same thing for a week's worth of data, you're going to get about 90% noise and 10% signal. And if you study that for a day or an hour, you're going to get about 99.5% noise and 0.5% signal. What does that tell you about our culture where the news is 24/7? Don't listen to the news. Just don't listen to it. If the signal's important enough, you'll get it. You may not agree with that. So let me read a poem by Nora Bateson, who I have the good fortune to be studying with at the moment. So, and she's a wonderful teacher, daughter of Gregory Bateson, who came up with that. She's an extraordinary person, Gregory Bateson. He's the one that wrote about information is a difference that makes a difference. And he also proposed a revolutionary idea that mind is not in our brain. Go figure. Well, where the heck is it? It's in nature. It's in living ecosystems. That's what mind is. Where is the difference? The fun, interesting thing about difference is you can't locate it. Okay. This is called harvest. Be careful. A hasty harvest is an unfeeding. It is non-food. Harvests are patient history and quiet roots that start tiny. While compost is necessary for the growing season, do not eat the compost. Yeah, wait. The eggshells and onion skins bear little resemblance to the conversation at the table where the meal they feeds you. The meal they fed feeds you. Wait. The industrial craving for instant food, ideas, and plans distracts from the entering ecological time. An apple seed in the ground is not an apple. It requires seasons, years, changes in light, wind, temperature. It must reach up into the spring sun and down into the winter earth. The blossoms need the insects and the song of the baby birds. This is not the time to harvest. This is the time to let these ideas come to find other context in the underground, in the wilderness. Notice the unecology of the question, what is the point? A meadow never asked such a thing. Life is making life, nothing less. The harvest is a time of golden brown reds and deep orange tones. The harvest is marking a long journey into the squishy death and rot that offers new compost. It is the last moon before the cold one comes. Do not race into winter before it's due. Harvest is long in its arrival. Sometimes it comes with an empty basket, leaving its lost leaves and roots to decompose, feeding the possibility of next year. Likewise, let the ideas and stories of today remain in the undergrowth. Let them find new context, new contacts, and new life. Let the movement of relating follow its own reachings. Let it touch and rename itself as it moves. This is the beginning. This is the middle. Let it form and inform. Do not ask what you will get out of this. This is the making of next year's rain. The point is the meadow of 100 years from now. Ecology is not instant. You cannot run into the shop and buy it. There is no summation, nothing to put in your pocket, only idea seeds and warmth and moist history. Relax. The possibilities are brewing, stewing. Let them wander and shape in ways you may have never considered. So, you know the poem by Coleridge, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner? Beautiful poem, long poem. But it's a wonderful story because they're out in the ship, the poem tells they're out in the ship. And somehow he inexplicably shoots an albatross and kills it with his bow. And albatrosses are considered good luck for sailors. So it was a horrible thing that he killed this albatross. It's bad luck. And all of the sailors on the ship started getting sick. And they all came down with illnesses, and they were pissed off that he had killed the albatross, hung the albatross around his neck as a kind of punishment. And they all died. Everyone on the ship died except him. And then there comes along a serpent in the water, a golden serpent. He describes it kind of undulating in the water. And he's been through this hell, right? I mean, he's on the ship alone and stranded in the middle of the ocean, and everyone has died around him, and he's done this terrible deed. And he sees this serpent. And there's this beautiful line in the poem that says, he blessed it unawares. He blessed it not knowing he was blessing it. And that moment of grace was his inversion into a spiritual awakening. And he saw the beauty of that serpent. He saw the beauty of something moving up and down in the darkness of the water, not all there. And so I think that's in a way what the moment is asking us to stretch ourselves further than we think we can stretch, to find ways of finding the life in our world, finding what is well and what is vital, the vitality in our own lives, through our own health, our diet, exercise. All those things are part of important living as an inspired life. Just keep taking care of yourself so you can take care of others, taking care of others, engaging in the community, being in the world but not of it. And that engaged bodhisattva practice is the heart of our spiritual path, in one way or another. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. Your way might be raising a kid. It might be going to work. It might be going out and working with homeless people. It might be taking care of your pet cat. The quote by the Dalai Lama says, people were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. The reason why the world is in chaos is because the things are being loved and the people are being used. I'll finish with one last poem again by Nora. This one's called Integrity. Poems are so wonderful. We have a poetry circle, by the way.
Yes.
She leads every Friday morning. Okay, this is called Integrity. This is the poem. So this is called Something Has to Matter. What matters continues. Surface distractions and day-to-day transactions are loud, the front part of our lives, but what matters stays below. Something is under us, like a drum beating through us, mattering, mattering, mattering. Perhaps we have not even noticed what matters. I thought I heard him say, no one has time to wait for the moon. That which matters takes time to tend, time to remember, time to become so intrinsic it is in our bones. It takes air and water and earth and memory. It takes hard work, day in, day out, generation after generation. That which matters is unsayable in words and is communicated through us. It is the grain in our wood, the hum in our song. The patterns of our lives bounce around in a ricochet room, repeating and responding in the same humming grain. Infinity matters in a world of faster, cheaper, more, more, more. The moon has time, and this moment, this meal, this walk, this work, this cup of tea is never to be repeated. It is precious. It matters what continues. It is the code through which all else will be, it matters. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Any questions or comments? Yeah, sure.
Well, while you were talking about the roots,
Yeah.
I bought, this past Christmas, I bought some red dogwood sticks. And then I put in some pots. And then I put boughs, so it's a Christmas decoration. And just recently, a couple weeks ago, the sticks are sprouting leaves. I never saw that before.
You weren't expecting that. You thought you were just buying sticks.
Yeah, I thought they were all dead.
That is great.
You can do that with laurels too.
Life can be surprising.
So I took them,
Yeah.
and I took them out of the pot and I had them planted in my, patio area in the ground. So now we're gonna see if we get some dogwood bushes growing.
Okay.
Is that gonna happen?
I'll talk to you about it.
She's
I
got
have a
green
feeling,
thumbs, so.
yeah, I have a feeling it's not gonna continue.
Okay, Gary, and then she should.
I want to thank you for talking about perils of exceptionalism on the front side of your talk.
Yeah.
It's my opinion, exceptionalism is pretty rampant in this village. And I think it's important for people in positions of leadership like yourself, and Alan Taylor at Unity Temple used to do that a lot. So watch out for exceptionalism, because we might not be as exceptional as we think we are.
Yeah, useful to have some ontological humility, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
On that point, I'm really glad you said that. I wasn't going to mention this, but I will now. In Chicago, there are more homeless people than there have been in decades. And those people are certainly not feeling exceptional.
No.
The other thing was something you said about the intimacy with with the parts of us that we don't have control of. It reminded me somehow, I was in this village when I was in the Peace Corps in Afghanistan, and farmers there were using basically water buffalo, these big animals.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they are huge beasts and fairly dumb. And this one farmer was always talking to, and I didn't know enough Dowdy to know, but someone told me, I asked, what's he doing? And the guy told me that he was friends with his buffalo. And that they never went out into the field together without having a conversation.
Makes sense.
That really resonated with what you were saying.
I've watched a movie, you have to see this, called Pig. Have you seen it yet? You gotta see this movie. It's just one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. It's on Netflix, I think. Pig.
P-I-G.
Yeah, it's gonna get in the camera.
Nicolas Cage.
I loved your talk and I found it so unbelievably resonant and helpful.
Speak up.
Oh, I loved your talk and I found it so resonant and
Yeah.
helpful. And I started thinking about, I was reading some essays in Mind of Clover, and one about, I believe Sano, it said, I just love this line, he said, singing and dancing is the voice of the Dharma, and cooking and gardening is the voice of the Buddha. And yesterday, when I was clearing out what seemed like an acre of daylilies, I kept saying that in my mind. Gardening is the voice of the Buddha. But then the amazing thing was I got it all cleared out, and the robins immediately came and got to work.
Someone else takes over.
Giving me the side eye. And they're the most ordinary birds in the world.
I know.
But they were not coming in before because of the daylilies.
Oh, yeah,
We cleaned out a whole side of our house, it was full of daylilies when we first bought it in here in Oak Park.
And so, to me, that was a lesson.
Nature's pretty resilient. You know, Italian farmers actually pull their tomato plants to stress them a little bit, because it makes the tomato grow better. A little stress might be okay, not too much. A little bit, a little discomfort might be okay. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend. Go down to the day in our village if you get a chance. We'll have lots of organizations down there doing good work in the community. It's good to learn about our community, what the other people are doing too. Okay, thank you.
We have some nice treats here. We have some nice treats here.
Oh, and there's some good treats that Shishin and Pat brought for kinship hour. Thank you, everyone online.
Hope you enjoyed yourself. How are you?